Hi there. In this video, I will go through the first bullet point in the group behavior section of organizations from the A2 psychology syllabus. The first bullet point is called group development and roles. There are three sections: group development, that's Tuckmans Stages; team roles, that's Belbin; and measuring team roles, that's the Belbin Team Inventory. It's a relatively short section, so let's get straight into it. So, the learning objectives, what you should know as a minimum from this section is describe Tuckman's 5 stages of group development, outline Belbin's 9 team roles. You should also be able to categorize them. There are 3 categories. And you should be able to describe and evaluate the Belbin Team Inventory. So we'll start with Tuckman and the group stages, the group development stages. I like to start this by just thinking about how do groups form. Think about some groups that you might be a member of and how did they form? How did they begin and where did the group go from there? Think about from when you first met until how that group is now. With Tuckman, we're talking about groups in a work context, but it can be applied to any type of group, like a friend group, for example. If you try to think of some stages, you likely think about how they formed first, how the group formed, that is. There might be some conflict in there. People might start to accept their roles within a group, things like that. And all of these can be applied to Tuckman's stages. Tuckman's paper, if you look at the source material, it's quite hard to read. But essentially, he was given many articles on group development, and from there he developed his ideas. If you want to read the abstract, just pause the video and then continue when you're ready. So, like I said, he studied 50 different articles and he was looking for patterns in how groups develop, specifically in the workplace. So, working teams, working groups. Firstly, he identified 4 stages which all rhyme: forming, storming, norming, and performing. Later, Tuckman and Jensen, a psychologist he worked with, added a 5th stage, adjourning. And think about what they might mean before I go on to explain what they mean on the next slide. Some of them are quite clear from the names, other less so. So this image is straight from the Russell textbook, which a lot of you might have if you are studying the Cambridge syllabus, which I assume you are if you're watching this video. This image nicely breaks them all down in a fairly clear way. So forming, some key parts to that are establishing ground rules, the fact that it's still quite formal and they treat each other as strangers. So generally they've just met or they haven't worked together in the past. Storming is when some conflict might come along. They start to communicate their feelings, but they're still looking at themselves as individuals rather than team members. They're likely to resist control by group leaders. There might be some hostility. Norming, they begin to feel like they're part of a team. They value and recognize the perspectives of others, and they start to establish their roles and responsibilities within that team. Then we've got performing, basically where they're doing what they're supposed to do and doing it well. You've got flexible roles, you've got little hierarchy, you've got an open and trusting environment. And adjourning just means the team is ending. Whatever they were supposed to do, they've done it. They might conduct an assessment of how everything went. They might recognize the contributions of different members of the team. There's some jargon that you should use if writing about this on an exam. For example, with storming, you can use the term intra-group conflict. Intra means within, as opposed to inter, which means between. For example, the word international means between or across nations. Intranational would mean within a country, within a nation. So here, intra-group conflict is conflict within one group. And that happens in the storming stage. During the norming stage, Tuckman wrote that cohesiveness develops. So they feel more cohesive, they feel more together as a group. And in the performing stage, people should have flexible roles, meaning they aren't just doing one thing. They might have a number of different jobs, and they're happy to switch jobs with others as practical and as appropriate. So the example I like to use, I think it's a bit old now, but everybody used to play Among Us, maybe not so much anymore. So we'll use this example. Forming would be just when people meet for the first time. They would be quite formal, except for that yo message from White. They'll equate themselves, they might establish some ground rules. Then we've got storming after the dead body is first reported. They might start to accuse one another. It was you. What? No, Orange did it. There'll be conflict here within the group, intra-group conflict. Next up is norming. This is when people might start to establish their roles. They'll recognize the need to work together and the value in working together. So in Among Us, that might be teaming up, making pairs, because it makes it a lot easier to catch the imposter if you do that. Then performing will be when they do the job and they do it well. They catch the imposter correctly. Finally, adjourning is the end. The group has done its job and they will go their separate ways. They might also recognize the accomplishments of certain members. They might review how the work went. Right, so let's look at a Cambridge mark scheme, a CIE mark scheme. This is from an 8-mark describe question, and it's short and it's simple. In an exam, you should be writing more than this. Give a little bit more detail in order to get the marks. But what they've written is, Tuckman and Jensen noted 5 stages: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning, which are creditworthy. They then mention the 4-stage development procedure. That just lines straight up with the stages, right? So orientation to the task, that's forming. Intra-group conflict happens with storming. Cohesion, that happens within the norming stage. And functional role relatedness, or constructive action, tackling the task at hand, this all happens during the performing stage. This is a question I've written answer on Google Classroom for my own classes, but this is a question you could try yourself. So describe 2 of Tuckman's initial 4 stages of group development. This is a mark scheme for storming. So the mark scheme will just say 1 mark for a basic answer, 2 marks for a detailed answer, and then they will give examples of basic and detailed answers. You can pause and read through them if you wish. And that is Tuckman. So we'll move straight on to Belbin's 9 team roles. With this section, I don't think it's difficult to understand. It's just that there is a lot to remember. So if you want to go back and watch again or slow it down, it's up to you. So Belbin's theory of team roles is based on a book that she wrote in 1981. Or that he wrote, sorry. Proposing that an ideal team contains people that are suited to different kinds of roles. I'm going to correct myself again. I believe it's a she and the slides are wrong. But it's not important. So Belbin proposed 9 roles and grouped them into 3 different categories. If you wish, you can pause the video, think of some roles that you think are important, that every working team should have. These are the 9 roles as outlined by Belbin. So we've got specialist, team worker, shaper, completer finisher, coordinator, plant, implementer, resource investigator, monitor, evaluator. And these can be grouped into 3 categories: thought-oriented roles, people-oriented roles, and action-oriented roles. Before we discuss them, pause the video, try to match them up. You could write this down or you could just try and do it in your head. There are 3 roles for each category. So 3 thought-oriented roles, 3 people-oriented roles, and 3 action-oriented roles. See if you can match them up successfully. And this is how they should have been grouped. So the action-oriented roles are shaper, implementer, and finisher. So action roles are to do with getting the job done. People-oriented roles, which include coordinator, team worker, and resource investigator, are involved with working with people, of course. And thought-oriented roles are often the creative ones, but not always. We've got plant, monitor, evaluator, and specialist. So we'll go through each role. We'll go through what the role is according to Belbin. These descriptions are pretty much straight from the Belbin website. So straight from the source. And then we'll also discuss potential problems with these people, how they might cause conflict, because this is something Belbin also speaks about. So the shaper. Shapers challenge the team to improve. They motivate others. They question established views, and they're usually dynamic and extroverted people. So essentially, they will look at other people's work and try to improve upon it. Implementers put ideas into action, so they make things happen. They get the ideas from other members and they make it into an actual practical plan. They talk about, okay, how do we actually do this? How do we get to the end result from here? Generally speaking, they're very organized and efficient. And completer finishers are worried with deadlines and attention to detail. So they will make sure that the job does get done and that it gets done in time and properly. So these people, the action-oriented people, the ways they might cause conflict are with shapers. They're often seen as confrontational. People might not like them. This is because they're looking at the work of others and they're trying to make it better. So if they're not careful, people might think that they're looking down upon the work of others or saying that it's not good enough because they're taking what others did and maybe they'll say, oh, maybe we could do it this way, or maybe you could change that. So that might offend some people. Implementers can be seen as inflexible, resistant to change because they are concerned with getting things done and getting them done now. So once they have a plan, they won't want to change that plan. So that might bother other people as well. Completer finishers can become perfectionists. They want everything done perfectly, so they may become too focused on small issues. Okay, the people-oriented roles are coordinator, team worker, resource investigator. A coordinator acts as a chairperson. They facilitate. They kind of guide the team. They will delegate work. They're not necessarily in charge. They're not a leader. It's a group it's a group in which everyone is equal, but they might act in a way like they're the leader, delegating and assigning roles. Team workers will encourage cooperation. They support others. They're very diplomatic. And if there's any conflict, they can often help. Resource investigators, generally speaking, they speak to people outside of the group. So they look for contacts or opportunities that could help them. Or if you need someone to speak to another department within the organization, for example, marketing, you want them to do something, the resource investigator would do that. Often outgoing people. And how might these people cause conflict? Coordinators might delegate too much. They might be accused of not doing anything themselves and just delegating all the work to others. Team workers, they can be indecisive. Because they don't want to offend anyone, they may sit on the fence. They won't take sides in any disagreement. And resource investigators, according to Belbin, they might lose enthusiasm quickly. 3 more. The thought-oriented roles. They are plant, specialist, and monitor evaluator. Plants, they are the creative ones. They create ideas. They're very innovative. So if we need a new or different way to do something, we need a plant. Specialists are just very good at a specific thing. They're specialized in doing one specific thing, and that's what they do. Monitor evaluators will look at all the options that are being proposed by team members and analyze and evaluate them. They need to be objective. They can't let relationships with people get in the way. So, the ways they can cause conflict. Plant, it's a bit stereotypical. The idea of the creative genius who maybe cannot communicate his ideas clearly, or she cannot be practical about how this idea can become reality. Specialists, maybe they can't do anything else really. But that's okay, that's their job. They're specialized in one thing. And monitor evaluators, because they want to be objective, they can be seen as detached or cold because they often don't develop strong relationships with anyone. But they do that for a reason. They want to be objective about choosing whose plans are the best plans. Right, so that's all the roles, 9 roles. So what do you think Belbin said when asked which role is the best or which is the most important? Belbin said that they're all equally important. We don't need well-balanced individuals, we need individuals who balance well with each other. So no role is the best or the most important. All roles are helpful and they all complement one another. Belbin claimed we need all 9. And there is a problem with this claim that we'll get into a bit later in the evaluation. But the problem that most people think about is, what about small teams? What about teams of 4 or 5? Perhaps Belbin's ideas are not well suited to these teams. However, there is a counterpoint. Belbin did say that people can take on multiple roles. So you could have a team of 4 or 5 where everyone takes on 2 or 3 roles. So it can work that way. And here is another Cambridge mark scheme on Belbin's 9 roles. There is a mistake. So I'd like you to pause the video and find it. And then unpause the video and I will point it out and let's see if you're correct. Okay, I hope you found the mistake. It is here. Team worker is under action-related roles and completer finisher is under people-related roles. They should be swapped. That's a mistake by Cambridge, which they later acknowledged. If you spotted that, well done. So this is just a nice image from Belbin of all 9 roles grouped by category: thinking, action, people. So I'm often asked, how much of this should you know going into an exam? Because it's not difficult in my opinion, but it is a lot to remember. In an 8-mark describe question, I think you should know all the roles' names. Although you may not have time to write them down, you should know them all. You should have a basic idea of what they are, and you should know what category they belong to. On top of that, I think you should know at least 2 or 3 roles in greater detail, because you could be asked something like describe 2 of Belbin's team roles for 4 marks. So you'd need a little bit more detail to make sure you get that 4 marks. It would be easy to get to 2, but you need a little bit more detail to get to 3 and 4. Okay, and that is Belbin's roles. Finally, we're going to look at Belbin's team inventory. And this was the measure that Belbin used to kind of uncover what roles people are suited to. So there are 2 parts to Belbin's team inventory. Firstly, the self-perception inventory, which we can call the SPI. Secondly, the observer assessment, which can be called the OA, like the Netflix show. Belbin calls this 360-degree feedback. This is because feedback comes from the individual who is being measured and also that individual's colleagues. So we're getting a picture of this person from different angles. So Belbin calls that 360-degree feedback, which is a nice little detail to include on an exam answer if you are describing the Belbin team inventory. And this is similar to another measure that you would have studied before now in the leadership section, and that is the leadership practices inventory, the LPI, because in that measure there's the LPI self completed by the leader and the LPI observer completed by the followers or the subordinates or whatever you want to call the people being led. So just like Belbin, the individual rates themselves and their colleagues also rate them, giving us a broader picture. So the self-perception inventory, SPI, is completed by the team member about themselves. And the way I'll go through this is just by some questions. So is it available in multiple languages? Yes. How many sections are there? 8 sections. How many statements in each section? 10. So we've got 8 sections with 10 statements in each one. And how many points are allocated? Also 10. I'll show you how they're allocated in a moment. Is there a minimum or a maximum number of statements that the person completing it must allocate points to? No. So they can leave out many statements if they want to, or they can allocate points to all of them. And is there a minimum or maximum number of observers who should do the OA, the observer assessment? Yes, 4. 4 minimum, no maximum. But that's for the next section, really. So for the SPI, the self-perception inventory, there are 8 sections with 10 statements each, and 10 points are allocated in each section. The observer assessment, like I said, should be completed by at least 4 of the team members' colleagues, and it's a completely different system. They have 2 lists of words, list A, list B. The list A words are associated with strengths of the 9 team roles. The person filling it out should tick if they believe that strength applies to the team member who they are observing. They can do a double tick if they think it really applies, strongly applies. If they don't understand any of the words, they can click on it and they will get a definition. And then they have list B, which are allowable weaknesses of the 9 team roles. So these should be ticked as well. And the observer should not tick more words on list B than list A. Even if they don't like this team member, they don't think they're very good, they can't give them more weaknesses than they do strengths. So if they only choose to tick 6 strengths, they can only tick 6 weaknesses. So with the SPI, the self-perception inventory, I'm going to give 10 example statements, what it would look like, and show you how it can be, how the points are allocated. So here we've got, I like to influence others, which can cause resentment. I'm keen to establish contacts that will be useful to the team, and so on. 10 statements. So I'll do it for myself to show you. So we have to allocate 10 points in any way that we want, but only 10 points maximum. So for me, I would probably think I can offer support and understanding when it is most needed. I might give myself a 5. I'll use up 4 of the points there, and now those 4 are gone. I only have 6 left. I like to take responsibility for bringing agreement a little bit. I'll put 2 there. So now I only have 4 left. Come up with new ideas, maybe a little bit as well. Now I only have 2 left. And I have no fear of challenging the views of others, 2 as well. So that means I've given 10 points now. 4 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. And I've left out 6 statements, because I don't think they apply to me as much as some of the others. Okay, if you want a little challenge for yourself, you can pause the video, try to think which role is associated with each of these 10 statements. All 9 roles are here somewhere, and 1 role is here twice. So if you want to try that, pause the video, because the answers are on the next slide. And here they are. So we have shaper for the first and the last one, and then we've got the others all in between. If you tried to do that, I hope you got most of them or all of them correct. So if we're to evaluate the team inventory, there's a few things we can talk about. Some strengths include ideas from this image. Let's see if you can figure out what they might be. So firstly, we've got the 360-degree feedback, right? So that should minimize social desirability bias, because if you know you're being judged by someone else as well as yourself, then you're probably going to be more honest with yourself. And we can even look at inter-rater reliability. Are they rating each other in similar ways? The second strength, it can be applied. Organizations can use this. See at the bottom, it says there are no strong examples of the following team roles. So that could be seen as a hiring need. Human resources might say, okay, we need to find people like this to improve our team. So that's an application strength. Weaknesses, I've got 2 images to help. So the top right image is of a team of 4. Like I said before, maybe it doesn't work so well with a team of 4. Sorry, expensive is coming first. So the first weakness is that it is quite expensive. For a smaller business, it might not be accessible, making it less useful for organizations, or at least for some organizations. Secondly, it may not work for teams smaller than 9, because you might have groups of 4 or 5. Counterpoint for that argument, everyone can have multiple roles. Okay, and here are some past exam questions you might want to try. I have the mark schemes on the next few slides. So you could try to answer them and then look at the next 2 slides. So pause it now if you're going to answer them. Press play again later. So for describe the Belbin Team Inventory, here is the mark scheme from Cambridge. So we've got 360-degree feedback. We've got the 9 roles mentioned. It's quite a short answer. I think a little bit more detail would be needed to make sure you get those 4 marks. And explain 1 strength, 1 weakness of the Belbin Team Inventory. Down the bottom here, I have level 2 and 3. I don't have level 0 and 1, because everyone should be aiming for level 2 at least. And some possible points in here. Just have two fairly big paragraphs arguing your point. Think of it as 3 marks each. And okay, if you're going to write an evaluation, a 10-mark evaluation, here are some of the things you might write about. So reductionism, you could write about Belbin's 9 roles and whether they're holistic or not. You could say they cover a wide range of people and people aren't limited to just one role. So you could argue it's holistic. If you think grouping people into 9 roles is reductionist, you can also argue that. And Tuckman accepts that groups take time to form and gives us 5 stages. Again, you could argue it's more holistic than just having 1 or 2, but he does assume that all groups go through this same process, regardless of the people in the group or the task required. So that might be a little bit reductionist. The individual versus situational debate, Tuckman's is certainly situational. This could be a problem because how a group develops will likely differ depending on the people in that group. Belbin's roles are more individual. Are they ignoring the situation? For example, does every group need a specialist? Maybe not. In terms of application and usefulness, Belbin's Team Inventory may be more useful than Tuckman's Stages of development. We spoke about what's useful with it. It may be able to identify hiring needs. Tuckman's Stages of group development, it's a bit harder to think of how that might be applied in a useful way. And also, you could write about the reliability and validity of the Belbin Team Inventory, as you always can if there's a measure in that section here. But you could only talk about Belbin, so you might combine reliability and validity into one paragraph on psychometrics in general. With reliability, you've got multiple people completing it. I know the sections are different, but you can still argue here for inter-rater reliability. And validity, you can say it's resistant to social desirability bias because people are more likely to be honest when they know other people are also rating them and they're not just rating themselves. You might have ideas about cultural bias. I'll leave that to you guys. Some people like to write about cultural bias, others don't. Tuckman and Belbin, all their ideas originated in the USA. So do with that knowledge what you will. And that's it. So we've got Tuckman's 5 stages, Belbin's 9 roles, and Belbin's team inventory. That is the group development and roles section in the organizations topic of A2 psychology. If there is a specific section anyone watching would like me to cover, please leave it in the comments below. I do plan to cover everything in time, but if there's something you'd like to be done now, let me know and I will try to prioritize making a video on that section. Okay, have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.